The X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X Zone Radio Show or endorsed in any manner by Rob McConnell, rel-mar McConnell Media Company, the X Zone Broadcast Network, its affiliated networks, stations, employees, or advertisers.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome to the X Zone, everyone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. We're coming to you around the world on the X Zone Broadcast Network, Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, iHeartRadio, and Simul Radio. If you're watching us on TV, there's only one place that you can watch us, and that's on the X Zone TV channel on Simul TV. So welcome to you, one and all. My guest this hour is a gentleman who is very well known and highly respected within the world of the paranormal and other sciences as well. His name is Jeffrey Mishlove, and he is definitely a world-class expert on the paranormal. And you may be saying, well, wait, I've never heard of him before, so tell us about him. Well, I'm going to read from his very own media kit here because it tells everything in quite detail, and you should really know the man that we're going to be talking to this hour. Number one, he holds the world's only doctoral diploma in parapsychology, ever awarded by an accredited university, that's the University of California, Berkeley, in 1980. He conducted his first parapsychology experiments as an undergraduate student more than half a century ago. His book, The PK Man, A True Story of Mind Over Matter, presents the results of a 10-year case study involving UFO appearances, power blackouts, ending of droughts, control of hurricanes, control of athletic events, and many other large-scale phenomena. The case is probably the most dramatic ever recorded in the history of physical research and parapsychology. His book, The Roots of Consciousness, has been widely used as college text for introductory course into consciousness studies. As a radio and television host, he has conducted over 1,000 interviews with researchers, thought leaders, and practitioners involved in parapsychology and the related disciplines. He currently produces daily monologues on parapsychology and related topics for his New Thinking Aloud channel on YouTube. He is the recipient of the Pathfinder Award from the Association of Humanistic Psychology for outstanding contributions to the exploration and expansion of human consciousness. His book, Psi Development Systems, based upon his doctoral dissertation, is a comprehensive overview of methods for training psychic abilities. Joining me now is Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove, and his website is www.newthinkingaloud.org or www.newthinkingaloud.com. And Jeffrey, welcome back to the X Zone. It has been way too long.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you, Rob.
Jeffrey, over the years, you must have seen many changes in how parapsychology and the paranormal is investigated. But first, I must congratulate you on your doctoral degree, the only one ever issued by an accredited university.
To be fair, there are about 200 people who did doctoral dissertations related to parapsychology. The unique thing about my diploma is it actually says parapsychology. Everyone else has a diploma that might say psychology or philosophy or education or some other discipline.
What was it that brought you to do so much work in the paranormal and parapsychology?
Well, when I was a young man in my early 20s, sort of just coming of age, I had a series of psychic dreams, and they literally guided me to do this. First of all, I was so curious to explain them, and I was a student at the time and talked to my professors, and I discovered quickly they had nothing intelligent to say at all, and so I made a resolution to myself that I'd have to become my own expert.
Over the years, what has been your most, what's the word I'm looking for here? Just give me a second. Your most, I don't want to use the word exciting, your most aha moment when investigating the paranormal or parapsychology?
Well, I think it would be back in 1976 when I set up an experiment with Ted Owens, the PK man. He had a reputation for causing UFO appearances, and I thought, well, let's see if he can do one for me. And he said, yes, he would make 3 of them occur within 100 miles of San Francisco within a 90-day period. And as it began to happen, he called me up one day. He said, Jeffrey, I can really feel this energy building. This is going to be incredibly dramatic. He said, there's going to be a UFO. It's going to be seen by hundreds of people. It will be photographed, and the photograph will be published on the front page of one of your local newspapers. And that all happened just within a few days of that phone call. The UFO appeared right over the campus of Sonoma State University in Northern California, 50 miles north of San Francisco, at a time when the art department was sponsoring an art exhibit using an airplane pilot, Stephen Pileski, who had smoke trailing out of his airplane, so he was creating designs in the sky. And this UFO appeared right in his airspace. It was seen from the air by the pilot and from the ground. It was photographed and videotaped. Hundreds of people saw it, and the videotape was published and presented on the Channel 9 Evening News in San Francisco, and a picture was published on the front page of the Berkeley Gazette in Berkeley, California the next day. So I think it's one of the most remarkable UFO sightings in the history of ufology, and probably the most dramatic event that has occurred in my career as a parapsychologist.
So tell me, Jeffrey, how was he able to do that?
Well, he claimed that he was in telepathic contact with invisible hyperspace beings. He called them the space intelligences. He said there were 2 of them. He nicknamed them Tweeter and Twitter because he said they make high-pitched squeaky noises, and they look like, if you were to see them in a physical form, they would look like giant insects, like maybe praying mantises. And he claimed they had an invisible UFO, a giant one, that hovered over the planet, and they trained him to telepathically send messages to them, and then they would carry out whatever instructions he gave them. That was his rationale, and I can't really dispute it, although parapsychologists might say more simply it was psychokinesis, that he caused this himself using his own mind over matter abilities.
Could this also explain a lot of the hauntings and the ghost apparitions that people see, that the person, one of the members of the team, can actually be responsible for the manifestation or the actions that are alleged to be paranormal when there's something very simple, that the mind is manifesting itself?
Well, once you acknowledge the possibility that psychokinesis is real, you can't rule it out in any circumstance. So it's I suppose one of the reasons why the mainstream academic community is rather frightened of parapsychology, because it might mean that all of their research studies might not be what they seem to be, because perhaps the experimenters or the participants in other studies in psychology or economics or sociology or any other behavioral science is influencing the study using their own psychokinetic ability.
Okay, I can understand how the PK might come into effect and be used in a small area like a room or even a home. But to have a UFO appear over an art display that is witnessed by hundreds, what does this tell us about the possibility that the mind is much more greater than we have ever even fathomed to understand or believe?
Yeah, well, this particular fellow was named Ted Owens. Mm-hmm. He's the subject of my book, The PK Man, and he claimed that it's just as easy to influence large-scale events as it is to bend a spoon using psychokinesis or influence a quantum mechanical random number generator. And in fact, he hoped that people would call these large-scale effects that he produced the Owens effect and name it after him.
Well, you and I have so much to talk about in the next 45 minutes or so. Please stand by, Jeff. You and I have to take our first break. And Exonation, if you'd like to contact Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove, if you've got something important to tell him, or if you just want to visit his website, it's www. All right, do you have your pencils and papers ready? www.newthinkingallowed.org. That's newthinkingallowed.org and newthinkingallowed.com. And we'll both be back on the other side of this break as the X Zone continues, right here from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My name is Rob McConnell. Don't go away. Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. SimulTV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. SimulTV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have SimulTV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Jeffrey Mishlove is our special guest this hour. Exonation, www.newthinkingaloud.org and newthinkingaloud.com. Jeffrey, are you familiar with the Billy Meier case?
Yes, I am, as a matter of fact.
Is it possible?
Fascinating case.
It is, and I'm just wondering if Billy is actually using PK in order to manifest the UFOs that people come to see him seem to summon.
Well, you know, it's a very controversial case. I know some people have suggested that he has used toy models of UFOs in the photographs that he's produced. On the other hand, he also has described detailed conversations that he has had with a supposed alien being. I believe he said his name is Semjasa,
right,
and that he's from the Pleiades, as I recall.
Yeah.
And I know people who take those conversations very seriously in and of themselves, regardless of whether the photographs may have been faked. But it is a fascinating case, and I know it's been studied extensensively by Wendell Stevens, who is a UFO researcher. I haven't really kept up to know if there are any newer developments on that case.
The only newer developments that I'm aware of when I had Michael Horn on the show a couple of, last year as a matter of fact, was that Billy's predictions that he has documented are more, there's a more likelihood of them coming to pass than even with Nostradamus and his predictions. So once again, if we're talking about predictions like the PK Man did, and then the manifesting of UFOs, I'm just wondering if Billy Meier was able to do all what he's doing because of the similarities between the Meier case and the PK Man, if he was using psychokinesis as well.
Well, here's what Ted Owens did, which
Okay.
I think makes him unique. I have in my files documentation of 168 demonstrations produced by Ted Owens, and in each one, he sent written letters in advance to various scientists saying this is what he intended to do. And then and these are large-scale effects and rare events like creating a heat wave in the middle of winter or a freezing cold spell in the middle of summer, affecting earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes, and power blackouts. I found that roughly 2/3 of those demonstrations worked out the way Owens predicted that they would. So you could say it's an example of precognition, although he claimed it was much more than precognition that was involved. So I don't know of a single example where Billy Myers actually sent a written notification in advance telling people exactly what to look for and when and where.
On Michael Horn's website, theyfly.com, there is a list of predictions. So, food for thought.
Okay.
With Owens, I would imagine that during his time that was there any MRI done on his on his brain to see what kind of activity he was having? If it would,
he would have loved that, and I worked very hard while he was alive. He died in 1987 to interest scientists, UFO researchers, parapsychologists, or any other interested scientists to do that sort of thing exactly, because he claimed actually that aliens had operated on his brain to give him the powers that he seemed to have. But unfortunately, back in those days, the closest I got to getting a serious scientist interested was J. Allen Hynek, the famous UFO researcher, and he believed that Owens produced real effects, but he said, I don't want to go near that man with a 10-foot pole because those effects are produced by his unconscious mind, and you can't really trust them or control them or know what's going to happen next.
With the abilities that the PK man had, why wouldn't mainstream science, along with you, work together to better understand what was happening and how the findings could actually be implemented with the rest of society to make this a better world?
Well, I think the sad answer is that humanity is simply not ready. I mean, consider this. I have a doctoral diploma in parapsychology. I earned it in 1980, and to this day, it is the only such diploma ever awarded by an accredited university anywhere in the world. There is an enormous social stigma surrounding parapsychology. There are funding agencies that won't touch any research in parapsychology, and most colleges and universities refuse to even teach courses in the subject, even though the field has really been around since 1882, and there are literally hundreds of studies. Here's the good news, Rob. The American Psychological Association has just published in their flagship journal, The American Psychologist, an analysis of what you could call it a meta-analysis, because it's an analysis of all the other meta-analyses that have been published in the field of parapsychology. They cover 1,700 different experiments done and reported in refereed scientific journals with overwhelmingly positive statistical results and good experimental controls.
You know, I remember when the first studies came out on ESP and the Zener cards, it wasn't laughed at, it wasn't scorned, it wasn't poo-pooed. And yet, when it comes to psychic phenomena, when it comes to, PK, telekinesis, poltergeists, and the onslaught of other categories, mainstream science backs away. Is it because?
Actually, J.B. Rhine at Duke University, who published those studies going back to the 1930s, was subjected to an enormous amount of scorn and opposition, even as recently as the 1970s. And in fact, the famous physicist John Wheeler published an article in Science in which he accused J.B. Rhine of fraud. Wheeler had to apologize for that later on, but that tendency to attack people doing research in parapsychology is very real, and I can tell you this, there isn't a single person working in the field today, and there may be 300 people actually, the membership in the Parapsychological Association is now up to 400, and I would wager that every single one of those individuals has suffered a certain amount of social persecution and stigma.
Well, then how come mainstream academia doesn't suffer the same social stigmas and the way that parapsychologists are treated? Because we all know that Christopher Columbus did not discover the Americas, and yet he is heralded as the founder, and yet it's not true. We know so much now about our past, but I often wonder if it's all a matter of saving face for academia.
Well, I know the reasons are very complex. I think it has to do with people being afraid they're going to be hoodwinked, and they don't want to fall for what their critics would accuse them of supporting the rising tide of superstition and irrational thinking. And I mean, there are all of these complex reasons, and not the least of which is that mainstream academia is, for the most part, wedded to a kind of materialistic metaphysics, which, according to which they think psychic phenomena are impossible.
But when we also use the example towards science and academia, that many scientists and many members of academia are Christians or Catholics or some other participant in a religious philosophy, where there is no proof of the deity that they recognize as God.
Well, you know, you're absolutely correct about that, but when it comes to the mainstream religions, they're kind of accepted, even though they contradict the materialistic paradigm. But parapsychology is more threatening for some reason, and you know, the critics will tell you, oh, the research is just shoddy, and that everybody involved is a true believer, and that's why they report positive findings. But careful analysis, such as this recent meta-analysis published by the American Psychological Association, shows that's not true. And I'm hopeful that this particular publication, because the psychologists are the most resistant of all the academic disciplines, that this is going to mean that perhaps parapsychology has turned the corner this month.
I hope it does. I really hope it does, because I believe that getting more members and more people involved, like yourself, with your qualifications, your expertise, the amount of years that you have researched this topic, and we get the truth and the real information out to the people, man, that'll be a day that I take my hat off and say, you know what, world? There's still a chance for you all. We'll be back on the other side of this break as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Jeffrey Mishlove is our guest. www.newthinkingaloud.org and newthinkingaloud.com. I'll be back on the other side of this break with the news. Don't go away. From our broadcast studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, to the world and beyond, you're watching the X Zone Broadcast Network. www.xzbn.net.
AVS Media Demo.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com. Exonation, Jeffrey Mishlove is our very special guest this hour. His websites are newthinkingaloud.org and newthinkingaloud.com. Jeffrey, I know I cut you off from saying something when I had to go on my news break.
Well, now I hope I could remember what I was going to say at the time. I'm afraid it's slipped through my mind.
Okay, let me ask you this then, Jeffrey. With all the yahoos out there on the internet who are claiming to be parapsychologists, the paper factories that are just, for $100 you buy your diploma, you get your transcript, and away you go, and you call yourself a doctor, you call yourself a reverend, you call yourself a bishop. How does that make you a person who went through the academic procedures? You did a dissertation, you've got a diploma from an accredited university, you are the real McCoy. How do all these people who are just full of donkey crap?
Well, now you've reminded me of what I was about to say, Rob. Good question. And the point I wanted to make is that roughly 2/3 of the population have had psychic experiences and have no problem accepting them. It's just that in academia you have about 25% of academics who are very strongly hostile, who are hardcore materialist, skeptic, atheist types, and they're threatened by parapsychology because it might imply a scientific empirical basis for religion, which is something they're opposed to. They think religion is an evil scourge on humanity. But because there's such popular interest and very little in the way of accredited professionals, there's that space is going to be filled up with all sorts of people making claims, and so all that I can do is try to provide the very best information that I have for people, and hope that it sticks occasionally with some people, and that's what I've been endeavoring to do for many decades.
Based on your research and being the author of Roots of Consciousness, what do we know today about consciousness?
Consciousness is the great mystery. William James, the founder of American psychology, wrote a classical essay called The Stream of Consciousness back in about 1890, and he wanted to initiate the scientific study of consciousness back then. But shortly after his death, the field of academic psychology took a turn in a different direction and became what they call behavioral science, meaning they only want to look at behaviors, not about consciousness at all. And so it took until roughly the 1970s before psychologists at all began to get interested in consciousness. And now it is a hot topic, a hot interdisciplinary topic in academia. And I would say this, the tendency these days is to say that consciousness is not an epiphenomenon of mind, of matter. That is, it is not the product of your nervous system. The consensus seems to be suggesting that consciousness is fundamental to reality, just like time and space and matter and energy are fundamental.
Let's talk a second about something that many researchers, and I'm talking about the self-professed researchers here. I'm not talking about a legitimate researcher like yourself. They all talk about poltergeist. They all talk about demonic possession. They all talk about this, that, and the other thing. When it comes to psychic abilities and those who are able to either use what can be proven to be psychic abilities and those who can communicate with the other side, what is your professional opinion about a medium, and do you have any idea how they do it?
Well, it seems as if there are some mediums who are very good at what they do. William James began researching mediums back in the 1880s. He worked extensively with a medium from Boston named Mrs. Piper, and he basically concluded that when it comes to communication with the departed, that he said this, dramatically speaking, the weight of the dramatic evidence suggests to him that mediumistic communication is authentic. But as a scientist looking at hardcore empirical data, all he could say is that Mrs. Piper seems to know things that she should not know by normal means. But that's still very far from establishing the existence of an afterlife. You might say that this medium and other mediums have offered ample proof of extrasensory perception, but evidence for the afterlife can always be potentially explained away as extrasensory perception amongst the living.
Why do you think that the investigation of the paranormal is so popular in today's society?
Yes, it certainly is. If you get on Facebook, you'll see that there are probably hundreds of discussion groups related to various aspects of the paranormal. And I think that's a positive development, because if professionals, if scientists and academics are not going to give it serious attention, then other people are going to, who are less qualified, are going to try and fill in the vacuum, and that's what's happening.
But if the people who are filling in the vacuum do not have the qualifications, how can they be taken as credible or even legitimate? And that includes any of their findings.
Well, yes, and in fact, it creates an opportunity for the skeptics to use their number one weapon, which is the horse laugh, and just try to laugh these people away, especially away from any funding and especially away from any academic positions of any sort. So, it's just one of the burdens that you have to bear when you're researching such a controversial area.
In your opinion, what is the most important area that needs to be researched?
Well, I would say probably healing. There's been a lot of research that's been done on psychic healing. There's a huge need for it, obviously. Our medical system is incredibly expensive. It's in some ways a burden on the whole economy, and to the extent that there are psychic healing, spiritual healing approaches that are highly effective, and the research suggests indeed there are, that this is an area that the entire society will benefit from more research.
So how do we get those with the money to put money into research in order for that the phenomena of psychical healing or spiritual healing, however you want to put it, is actually undertaken and their findings be seriously considered and brought forward to the public and let the public choose which direction they want to go?
Well, I imagine that when enough people in the public say that this is what they want, for example, if you had politicians running for office who say, I want to see the government put their money into researching this area, that would help. Otherwise, the government is afraid because of this horse laugh effect. So basically, almost 100% of the funding these days comes from private individuals who are not, they can spend their own money without worrying about who's going to laugh at them. But if anybody is in a bureaucratic situation, they're afraid of losing their own job. And having your colleagues laugh at you is one of the worst things that any professional could experience.
So I would imagine that the wannabes on the internet are actually doing the world of academia a great service by just being nonsensical and non-professional.
Well, it's a double-edged sword. It provides a lot of ammunition for the skeptics. Stanley Krippner, another parapsychologist colleague of mine, likes to call them the scoffers because he says they're not real skeptics. A real skeptic is someone who questions themselves, but these scoffers are true believers, actually. They believe they have all the answers already. In any case, the best way, I think, to address them, and certainly the path that I've taken, is just to ignore them and do the research with the resources that are available, and hopefully the day will come when the human population is more mature and can handle this phenomenon. It may take decades or maybe even centuries for that to happen. But I'm very optimistic that eventually our whole culture will come around and we'll have a more balanced view of things. I think you have to also appreciate that it's only about 200-300 years since we were burning witches at the stake. So there's still a lot of unprocessed data that we have to deal with. I mean, for example, there's still people in our country and certainly in many other countries who are afraid of witchcraft.
All right, Jeffrey, we've got to hold it there because I have to take my final break. Exonation, Jeffrey Mishlove is our special guest, www.newthinkingallowed.org, and that's also newthinkingallowed.com. I'll be back on the other side of this break with Jeffrey as we wrap up this hour here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My name is Rob McConnell. Don't go away.
Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomena, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light. X Zone Nation, Jeffrey Mishlove has been our guest this hour. And I must say, Jeffrey, it's been a great pleasure talking to you. And as I said to you during the commercial break before we came back on air, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and also for doing the great work that you've done over the years. And it's because of your efforts and the efforts of other researchers and scientists like yourself that I believe in my heart of hearts that the paranormal will be soon recognized as a science and not a pseudoscience, and that the work that you've done and other researchers will be finally taken very seriously, and academia will have no other choice than to say, you know what, it's real. So thank you for your work, sir.
Thank you.
As a parapsychologist, do we have any inkling or any way whatsoever, Jeffrey, that we can understand how a psychic does psychic predictions? Are they, in fact, using the PK, as you and I discussed earlier this hour, or do they have the subconscious ability to bend the time-space continuum and actually review the future before it even happens?
Well, it's a really good question. I can tell you it's very controversial. There's some people who say it's impossible for anyone to know the future because the future hasn't happened yet. There are other people, especially in the field of physics, who say, oh, yes, Einstein understood that the future exists in the now moment. It all really exists in the now moment, and that there have been, in the last 5 years, annual conferences amongst physicists on what they call backwards causality. In other words, causal influences on the present moment coming from the future. Even particles that move backwards through time. So it's an area that physicists are now giving very serious consideration.
What influence do you think that quantum physics, quantum mechanics will have in the world of the investigation of paranormal phenomena and in parapsychology?
Well, I would say this. Quantum physics is currently considered the bedrock found theory in physics. Physicists might say it's the bedrock theory of all of science. But the founder of quantum theory, Max Planck, back in the 1930s, said that as far as he's concerned, consciousness underlies everything. He said you cannot get underneath consciousness, that itself is the bedrock. So as a result, there's an enormous interest. Physicists, especially theoretical physicists, quantum physicists, are the most open, I would say, of all the different academic disciplines to the findings of parapsychology. And in fact, one physicist once wrote that if the parapsychologists hadn't already discovered these things, we would be predicting that they should find them.
Very interesting. And once again, going back to PK, what is your expertise and what is your expert opinion when it comes to poltergeist activity?
Well, the standard thinking about poltergeists is that we're not talking about a noisy ghost, which is what the term means in German.
Right.
What it really is psychokinetic activity, typically associated with a teenage person, a young person who has anger issues and who has a lot of repressed anger, and the anger comes out psychokinetically in terms of poltergeist-like manifestations. So I would say that view is not 100% satisfying to me. There are poltergeist cases I'm aware of that where it really does appear as if there might be a discarnate entity producing the phenomena. So the problem is that there are very few people researching it.
Once again,
in the field of physics, you have thousands of physicists working on problems like string theory, whereas there are probably less than a dozen full-time parapsychology researchers in the world today.
Tell me about New Thinking Aloud. I love that.
Well, let me say it's spelled ALLOWED.
Right.
And I started the original Thinking Aloud TV series. It ran on the satellite to public television stations across North America from 1986 to 2002. And then in 2015, 3 years ago, I launched the YouTube channel, New Thinking Aloud, to sort of pick up where we left off in 2002. And my goal is to interview the senior researchers in the field of parapsychology and consciousness exploration, and to do as much as possible what I call career retrospective series of interviews. So I've been interviewing a lot of guys who are in their mid to late 70s and even in their 80s, and in fact even in their 90s.
Wow.
And I do lengthy interviews with them, sometimes as many as 24 interviews covering their whole life work, so that they will have a legacy to leave behind for people who watch video. And I'm endeavoring to put out the very best information from the most serious people in the field that I can find.
When it comes to parapsychology and the research that you do and other parapsychologists who are accredited, the work that they do, over the past 20 years, Jeffrey, where have you seen the biggest change when it comes to the recognition of the research that you and others have done?
Well, I would say one place to look would be the field of remote viewing. The government sponsored a remote viewing program that ran for 20 years from roughly 1976 to 1996. And after the government closed down what was known as the Stargate program, the participants who were in the military and in private research institutions began setting up a whole range of small businesses doing remote viewing for profit and for social good. And now you've got literally thousands of people who have been trained in the remote viewing process, which I would say is another form of clairvoyance. And it's like a cottage industry at this point. There are people who are using it successfully for predicting the stock market, for wagering in athletic events, for working with police departments. I wouldn't be surprised if the military still has a very, very quiet, secret group doing that work. They'd be foolish if they didn't, because during the time the program was publicly active, well, it was secret at the time, but during those years that we now know about, there were many successes for the intelligence services. So it seems as if remote viewing is a skill that can be taught, that can be communicated to people, and that has real practical applications. It's not as if you're going to become a billionaire overnight or work miracles, but very slowly, very surely, the people in the remote viewing community, and they now have their own organization, the International Remote Viewing Association, I would say they're doing good work, and they deserve to be watched carefully.
But if remote viewing is as good as many people believe it is, why don't the remote viewers go into the future and come back with the solutions to many of the problems facing this planet today?
Well, I suppose you could say it's the Cassandra effect. To my knowledge, there are remote viewers who do have solutions to a number of problems, but then there's, you know, the myth of Cassandra. She was given the gift of prophecy by the gods, but they also cursed her at the same time and said, yes, you can foresee the future, but no one will believe you. And to some extent, parapsychologists are still faced with that problem. On the other hand, there are all kinds of small businesses trying to market new technologies, typically things that are known as psychotronic technologies or bioenergetic technologies that they claim are they're learning how to construct these devices, their actual devices, because they have either looked into the future or they're in touch with non-physical beings or beings from other dimensions who are giving them this information. I haven't had the opportunity to test all of these new products that are out on the market now. I know there are dozens of them, but it's not as if we're lacking in solutions. It's really more a question of implementing them. You know, if we had the political will, we could end starvation on the planet today. But the will to do that doesn't seem to exist. Well, the same thing is probably true of global warming.
Exactly. Jeffrey, the time has come when you and I must say so long for tonight. But once again, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm a big fan of yours. And I hope that we have the pleasure of bringing you back on in the future so we can continue this very interesting talk on the reality of parapsychology.
I would enjoy that, Rob.
Take care of yourself, my friend, and look forward to speaking to you again soon. Exonation, if you'd like to find out about Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove, his websites are newthinkingaloud.org and newthinkingaloud.com. And like you said, it's ALLOWED. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the Talkstar Radio Network, iHeart Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, X Zone Broadcast Network, Simul Radio, and Simul TV. Don't go away. Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X Zone, sci-fi, and horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.